The lawyer's voice droned on, but Brielle Jackson could barely hear him over the pounding of her heart. She sat in the leather chair, her hands resting protectively on her 6-month pregnant belly, while her late Aunt Dorothy's relatives filled the other seats around the polished conference table. The air conditioning was too cold and she wished she'd brought a sweater, but she'd sold most of her nice clothes 2 months ago when she lost her job at the grocery store. To my cousin Patricia, the lawyer read, I leave my property at 428 Riverside Drive in the sum of $50,000. Patricia, a woman with tight curls and too much perfume, smiled smugly. Brielle watched her accept the news with a practiced nod, as if she'd expected nothing less. To my nephew Gerald, I leave my stock portfolio, currently valued at approximately $75,000. Gerald, a man in his 40s with an expensive suit, leaned back in his chair with satisfaction. He didn't even look at Brielle, though she'd caught him staring at her pregnant stomach earlier with barely concealed judgment. The reading continued. Each relative received something substantial. Money, property, jewelry, cars. Brielle's stomach churned, not from morning sickness but from growing dread. She'd loved Aunt Dorothy, had visited her every week until she passed, had held her hand in the hospital. But she hadn't expected anything. She'd come today only because the lawyer had insisted. And finally, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses, to my great-niece Brielle Jackson, I leave my cabin located at 1247 Mountain Ridge Road, along with all its contents and the 5 acres of land it sits upon. Silence filled the room for 3 long seconds. Then Patricia laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle but a loud, sharp bark of amusement. The cabin? That old shack in the middle of nowhere. Gerald joined in, his laughter deeper. Dorothy kept that place? I thought it fell down years ago. I drove past it once, another relative added. It's barely standing. No electricity, no proper plumbing. It's worthless. Brielle felt heat rise to her cheeks. She kept her eyes on the table, on her hands, anywhere but their faces. The baby kicked inside her as if sensing her distress. That poor girl, Patricia said, not bothering to lower her voice. Pregnant and alone, and all she gets is a shack that'll probably cost more to tear down than it's worth. At least the rest of us got something useful, Gerald added. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. The property does have historical significance in the family. It's been in the family for over 80 years. Historical junk, Patricia muttered. Brielle stood up slowly, her body heavy with pregnancy and humiliation. The lawyer handed her a manila envelope containing a single key and a document with an address. His eyes held sympathy, which somehow made it worse. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. As she walked toward the door, she heard Patricia whisper to Gerald, what's she going to do with a broken-down cabin? She can't even afford a decent car. Brielle's old Toyota in the parking lot proved Patricia right. The car was 12 years old, had a dent in the passenger door and needed new tires. But it ran and that was all that mattered. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, staring at the key in her hand. It was old, made of brass, worn smooth from years of use. She thought about Aunt Dorothy, about the woman's kind smile and gentle hands. Dorothy had never been wealthy like the rest of the family. She'd worked as a teacher, lived simply, never married. But she'd always made time for Brielle, especially after Brielle's mother died when she was 16. When Brielle's boyfriend left after learning she was pregnant, Aunt Dorothy had been the only one who didn't judge her. The relatives thought the cabin was a joke, a final insult. But Aunt Dorothy had never been cruel. There had to be a reason she'd left Brielle this property. Maybe it was worthless, maybe it was falling apart, but it was hers. In a life where nothing felt stable anymore, where she'd lost her job, her relationship, and her savings, having something that belonged only to her meant everything. Brielle started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. She had $300 in her bank account, a baby coming in 3 months, and now a cabin in the mountains. The relatives had laughed at her. The lawyer had pitied her. But she'd faced worse in the past year. She drove home to her small apartment, the one she'd have to leave in 6 weeks when her lease ended because she couldn't afford the rent increase. She packed her few belongings into 3 suitcases and 4 cardboard boxes. Her furniture was secondhand and not worth moving. The landlord could have it. That night, she lay in bed with her laptop, searching for information about Mountain Ridge Road. The area was remote, 3 hours north, nestled in the Appalachian foothills. The town nearby was small, population barely 3,000. There were photos of mountains, forests, and winding roads. It looked peaceful, isolated. Nothing like the city she'd lived in her whole life. Fear crept in as she stared at the ceiling. What if the cabin really was falling apart? What if she got there and found it uninhabitable? What would she do then, pregnant and with nowhere else to go? But beneath the fear was something else. Something that felt almost like hope. Aunt Dorothy had loved that cabin enough to keep it all these years. Maybe, just maybe, it could be a new start. Have you ever felt completely alone, like everyone was laughing at your struggles instead of helping? What would you do if your last inheritance was mocked by everyone around you? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and please subscribe to follow Brielle's journey. Will this tiny cabin become her salvation or her biggest mistake? Stay with us to find out. The next morning, Brielle loaded her car. The boxes fit in the trunk and back seat. She wedged pillows around them to keep things from shifting. Her growing belly made it hard to bend and lift, but she managed. She'd learned to manage a lot of things on her own lately. She left her key on the apartment counter and walked out without looking back. There was nothing to look back for. Her old life was over. Whatever waited for her at that cabin, it had to be better than staying in a city where she could barely afford to eat, where every day reminded her of all she'd lost. The drive north took longer than expected. Her car struggled up the mountain roads, the engine whining in protest. She stopped twice for gas, watching her money dwindle. She ate a sandwich she'd packed from home and drank water from a bottle, trying not to think about how little cash she had left. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the roads became narrower and more winding. Trees pressed in on both sides, thick and green. She passed through the small town, just a main street with a few shops, a diner and a post office. People on the sidewalk turned to watch her car pass, curious about the stranger. The GPS on her phone directed her up a gravel road that branched off from the main highway. The road was rough, full of potholes and rocks. Her car bounced and rattled. She gripped the steering wheel tight, anxiety building with every turn. Finally, the GPS announced she'd arrived. Brielle stopped the car and stared. The cabin sat in a small clearing, surrounded by tall trees. It was tiny, maybe 600 square feet, made of dark wood that had weathered to gray in places. The roof sagged slightly on one side. The windows were dusty and dark. The porch had several boards missing and the steps looked treacherous. Patricia's laughter echoed in Brielle's memory. This was what she'd inherited. This was her future. She turned off the car and sat in the silence. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows. The air was cooler here, fresher. Birds called from the trees. It was so quiet compared to the city, where sirens and traffic had been her constant soundtrack. Brielle opened the door and stepped out. Her legs were stiff from the long drive. She walked slowly toward the cabin, each step careful on the uneven ground. The porch creaked under her weight. The key felt heavy in her hand. She unlocked the door and pushed it open. The hinges squealed in protest. Inside was dark and smelled of dust and old wood. She fumbled along the wall for a light switch, found one and flipped it. Nothing happened. No electricity, just like the relatives had said. Using her phone's flashlight, she stepped inside. The main room held an old couch, a small table and a wood stove. Doorways led to what looked like a bedroom and a bathroom. Everything was covered in dust. Cobwebs hung from the corners. The floor was bare wood, scratched and worn. Brielle sank down on the couch, ignoring the dust that puffed up around her. She was exhausted. Her back ached. The baby was moving, pressing against her ribs. And this rundown cabin in the middle of nowhere, was now her home. For the first time since the lawyer's office, she let herself cry. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears that slipped down her cheeks. She tried so hard to stay strong, to believe things would work out. But sitting in this dark, cold cabin, it felt like she'd made a terrible mistake. The relatives had been right to laugh. What was she going to do here? How would she survive? How would she take care of a baby in a place with no electricity or running water? But even as the tears fell, Brielle knew she couldn't give up. She had nowhere else to go. No one else to turn to. This cabin, as broken and empty as it seemed, was all she had. And somehow she would make it work. She had to. For herself and for the child growing inside her. She wiped her tears and stood up. Tomorrow she would figure out what to do. Tonight, she would sleep in her car, which at least had locks and was warmer than this cabin. She grabbed a blanket from one of her boxes and headed back outside. The stars were coming out, more stars than she'd ever seen in the city. They filled the sky, brilliant and countless. Brielle looked up at them as she settled into her car's reclined front seat, the blanket pulled around her. Maybe Aunt Dorothy had looked at these same stars. Maybe she'd sat on that porch and found peace in this quiet place. Maybe there was something here worth finding, something the relatives couldn't see because they'd never looked past the surface. Brielle closed her eyes, one hand on her belly, and tried to believe that tomorrow would be better. Morning came with birdsong and sunlight streaming through the car windows. Brielle woke with a stiff neck and an aching back, her body protesting the night spent cramped in the front seat. She sat up slowly, blinking against the bright light. The clearing looked different in daylight, less ominous. The trees were vibrant green and wildflowers dotted the grass near the tree line. Her stomach growled. She'd finished her sandwich yesterday, and all she had left was a granola bar and half a bottle of water. She would need to drive back to town soon to find a grocery store, but first she wanted to look at the cabin in the daylight, to assess what she was really dealing with. She climbed out of the car, stretching her arms above her head. The mountain air was crisp and clean, so different from the exhaust-filled air of the city. Despite everything, despite her fear and uncertainty, there was something peaceful about this place. Walking around the cabin's exterior, she noted the damage more clearly now. Several roof shingles were missing. The gutters hung loose in places. The porch definitely needed repair before it would be safe to use regularly. But the structure itself seemed solid. The foundation was stone and mortar, still intact. The walls were straight, not leaning or buckling. It wasn't as hopeless as she'd feared in the dark. She tried the front door again, pushing it wide to let light and fresh air inside. The main room looked better in daylight too. The couch was old but might be salvageable with a good cleaning. The wood stove appeared functional, with a stack of old firewood beside it. The kitchen area was tiny, just a counter with a sink and a few cabinets, but it was there. The bedroom held a metal bed frame with a bare mattress that smelled musty. She wouldn't sleep on that without thoroughly cleaning it first, maybe not even then. The bathroom had a toilet, a sink and a small shower stall. She turned the sink tap and after a rattling noise, brown water spurted out, then ran clear. At least there was water, even if it needed to run for a while. Back in the main room, Brielle noticed details she'd missed in the dark. Photos hung on the walls, faded and dusty. She moved closer to look at them. Some showed people she didn't recognize, but others showed Aunt Dorothy as a much younger woman, standing in front of this very cabin with her arm around another woman. Both were smiling. There were paintings too, small ones tucked between the photos. Landscapes, mostly showing the mountains in different seasons. They were good, skilled work. Had Aunt Dorothy painted them? Brielle had never known her aunt had artistic talent. She spent the next hour exploring, opening cabinets and drawers. Most were empty, but she found some basic dishes, a few pots and pans and utensils. In the bedroom closet she discovered old linens, blankets and what looked like quilts, all needing a good wash but potentially useful. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it and saw a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Is this Brielle Jackson? This is Helen from Mountain Valley Baptist Church. Your Aunt Dorothy was a member here. We heard you inherited her cabin. If you need anything, please let us know. Welcome to our community." Brielle stared at the message. She didn't know how this Helen person had gotten her number, but the kindness in the words made her throat tight. She typed back a simple thank you, then noticed her phone battery was at 15%. She had no way to charge it here. That settled it. She needed to drive to town, find the grocery store, and see if there was anywhere she could charge her phone. She grabbed her purse, checked that she still had her cash and headed for the car. The drive back down the mountain road was easier in daylight. She could see the beauty of the landscape, the way the morning sun filtered through the trees, the glimpses of valleys far below. When she reached the town, she drove slowly down Main Street, looking for what she needed. The grocery store was small, family-owned by the look of it. Inside, the aisles were narrow but well-stocked. Brielle calculated carefully, choosing bread, peanut butter, crackers, canned soup, and fruit. She added toilet paper and soap to her basket, watching the total climb. At the register, the cashier, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair, smiled warmly. "You must be Dorothy's niece," she said. "I heard you were coming to town. I'm Susan." Word traveled fast in small towns, apparently. Brielle managed a smile. "Yes, I'm Brielle. Nice to meet you. Dorothy was a wonderful woman. Taught my daughter in 3rd grade. We were all sad to lose her." Susan bagged the groceries carefully. "If you need anything, you just ask. Folks around here take care of each other." Brielle paid, her cash supply now down to $140. She thanked Susan and carried her bags back to the car. As she loaded them in the trunk, she noticed a man watching her from across the street. He was tall, with dark skin and broad shoulders, wearing jeans and a faded blue t-shirt. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod, then walked away. She tried to shake off the weird feeling and got back in the car. On the way out of town, she spotted a library and pulled in. Inside, she asked if she could charge her phone, and the librarian kindly directed her to a table with outlets. While her phone charged, Brielle used one of the library computers to search for information about getting electricity and water working at the cabin. What she found was discouraging. Getting power turned on would require an electrician to inspect the wiring first, and that would cost money she didn't have. The water seemed to be from a well, which was good, but she'd need to have it tested to make sure it was safe to drink. More money. She sat back in the chair, fighting down panic. She had a place to live, which was more than she'd have in 6 weeks if she'd stayed in the city. But without electricity, without money for repairs, how could she manage? How could she prepare for the baby? Her phone, fully charged now, buzzed with another text from Helen at the church. "We're having a community dinner tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Please come. Everyone would love to meet you. We can help with anything you need." Brielle hesitated, then replied that she would try to come. She wasn't used to accepting help from strangers, had learned through hard experience that most offers came with strings attached. But what choice did she have? She drove back to the cabin as the afternoon sun climbed higher. The gravel road seemed a little less rough now that she knew what to expect. When she pulled into the clearing, she was startled to see a truck parked near the cabin. Her heart raced. Someone was here. A man emerged from around the side of the cabin. It was the same man who'd been watching her in town. Up close, she could see he was probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Hey, sorry if I startled you," he said, holding up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm Terrence Montgomery. I own the property next to this one about half a mile through the trees. I saw you arrive yesterday and wanted to introduce myself." Brielle stayed by her car, wary. "How did you know I was here?" "Small town. Word gets around." He smiled. "Also, I could see your car from my place. I walked over to check if everything was okay. I was friends with your aunt. She was a good neighbor." Something in his tone was genuine. Brielle relaxed slightly. "I'm Brielle. I know. Dorothy talked about you. She was proud of you." Terrence gestured toward the cabin. "I was just checking the water pump and the electrical panel. I know this place has been empty for a while. I hope you don't mind. Did you find anything wrong?" She walked closer, still cautious but curious. "The well pump works, which is good news. But the electrical panel is old, probably hasn't been updated in 40 years. You'll need an electrician to look at it before you can get power turned on safely." He paused. "I actually am an electrician. Well, I'm a contractor. I do electrical work, plumbing, construction. I could help you out if you want." Here it was. The offer with strings. Brielle straightened her shoulders. "I can't pay you. I don't have money for that." Terrence shook his head. "I'm not asking for money. Your aunt helped my family years ago when we had nothing. When my dad died, she made sure my mom had firewood all winter. She brought us food. She tutored me for free when I was failing math in high school." His expression grew serious. "I owe her. Helping you would be a way to pay that back." Brielle wanted to refuse, wanted to say she could handle it herself. But standing there, 6 months pregnant and nearly broke, she knew that was foolish pride talking. Aunt Dorothy had accepted help when she needed it. Maybe that's what she was supposed to learn here. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you. I would appreciate any help you can give." His smile widened. "Great. I've got some supplies in my truck. Let me grab them and we can get started. First thing is to check that wiring and see what we're working with." As Terrence walked back to his truck, Brielle felt something shift inside her. Maybe the relatives had been wrong. Maybe this cabin wasn't worthless. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. Terrence returned with a toolbox and a large flashlight. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew his way around old buildings, stepping carefully across the porch boards and ducking slightly as he entered the cabin. Brielle followed, watching as he opened the electrical panel beside the front door. "This is going to take some work," he said, shining his flashlight into the panel box. "The wiring is ancient, but it's not as bad as it could be. The main issue is that several circuits are corroded, and the breaker box itself should probably be replaced. But the good news is it's fixable." "How long would it take?" Brielle asked, leaning against the doorframe. "To do it safely? Maybe 2 full days of work. I can start tomorrow if you want. I've got a project finishing up this week, but I can spare the time." He closed the panel and turned to face her. "In the meantime, you can't stay here without power. It gets cold at night, even in summer. I slept in my car last night. I can do that again." Terrence frowned. "You're pregnant. You can't sleep in your car." He seemed to consider something, then said, "Look, I have a guest cabin on my property. It's small, just 1 room, but it has electricity and heat. You could stay there until we get this place fixed up." Brielle's instinct was to refuse. She didn't know this man, didn't know his motivations. But the thought of another night cramped in her car, of her back aching and the baby pressing against her ribs, made her reconsider. Besides, if he'd wanted to hurt her, he could have done so already when she arrived and found him here. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Completely sure. Dorothy would want you to be safe and comfortable." He pulled out his phone. "Here, let me show you a picture." He scrolled to a photo of a small but neat cabin, similar in style to this one but clearly well-maintained. It had a covered porch with a rocking chair, flower boxes under the windows, and fresh paint. "I built it last year for my mom to stay in when she visits," Terrence explained. "She lives in Florida now, so it's empty most of the time." Brielle made her decision. "Okay, thank you. But just until this place is fixed." "Deal." Terrence smiled. "Let me help you move your stuff over. We can walk there. It's easier than driving." They spent the next hour carrying her belongings along a narrow path through the woods. Terrence insisted on carrying the heavier boxes despite her protests. He walked ahead, pointing out roots and rocks so she wouldn't trip. The path was shaded and pleasant, with the sound of birds overhead and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The guest cabin appeared through the trees like something from a storybook. It was exactly as the photo had shown, charming and welcoming. Terrence unlocked the door and held it open for her. Inside was a single large room with a bed, a small kitchenette, a table with 2 chairs, and a door leading to a bathroom. Everything was clean and fresh. The bed had crisp white sheets and a blue quilt. The kitchenette had a mini fridge, a microwave, and a hot plate. "The bathroom has a shower," Terrence said, setting down the boxes he'd carried. "There are towels in the closet, and I'll bring over some firewood in case you want to use the wood stove on cold nights, though you probably won't need it." Brielle looked around, overwhelmed by his kindness. "This is too much. You barely know me. I knew your aunt, and that's enough. Besides, helping people is what we do around here." He moved toward the door. "I'll let you get settled. My main house is just over that rise if you need anything. I'll come by tomorrow morning to start work on your cabin." After he left, Brielle sat on the bed and looked around her temporary home. It was the nicest place she'd stayed in months, certainly nicer than her cramped apartment had been. She felt the baby move inside her, a gentle rolling sensation, and she placed her hand on her belly. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "We're going to make this work." That evening she unpacked her belongings, made herself dinner with the groceries she'd bought, and took a long hot shower. The water pressure was perfect, the temperature just right. She stood under the spray for longer than necessary, letting the heat ease her sore muscles. Before bed, she checked her phone and found another message from Helen at the church, reminding her about tomorrow's dinner. She also had a voicemail from the lawyer who'd handled Aunt Dorothy's will. "Ms. Jackson, this is Richard Patterson. I wanted to follow up and make sure you found the cabin without issue. Also, your aunt left specific instructions that I provide you with any information you might need about the property. Please call me if you have questions. I knew Dorothy well. She cared about you very much." Brielle saved the message. She'd call him back tomorrow after she had a better sense of what questions to ask. For now, she just wanted to sleep in a real bed, to rest without worry for one night. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee. Confused, she sat up and saw a thermos on the small table with a note. "Thought you might want coffee. Is decaf good for the baby? Come over when you're ready. We'll head to your cabin. Terrence." Brielle smiled despite herself. When was the last time someone had thought about what she needed before she even asked? She poured herself a cup of the coffee, added a little sugar from the packets he'd left, and sat at the table, sipping slowly. After breakfast, she walked over the rise to find Terrence's main house. It was a beautiful log home, larger than she'd expected, with a wraparound porch and large windows. Terrence was on the porch working on what looked like a piece of furniture. "Morning," he called when he saw her. "Sleep well. Better than I have in months. Thank you for the coffee." "No problem. You ready to tackle that electrical work?" They walked back to her cabin together. Terrence had brought more tools and materials loaded into a wheeled cart that he pulled along the path. At the cabin, he got to work immediately, explaining what he was doing as he went. "I'm replacing the old breakers first. These are shot, completely corroded. Then I'll check each circuit to make sure the wiring is safe. If anything looks damaged, I'll replace it." He glanced at her. "You don't have to watch this. It's pretty boring work." But Brielle stayed curious. She cleaned while he worked, sweeping out dust and wiping down surfaces. The cabin slowly began to look more like a home. She found a broom in the small closet and swept the floors. She washed the windows with water from the well and some vinegar she'd bought at the store. As she cleaned the main room, she discovered more paintings hidden behind furniture. They were all landscapes, all beautiful, all signed with initials she didn't recognize. She carefully set them aside to look at more closely later. "Your aunt loved this place," Terrence said during a break. He was sitting on the porch steps, drinking water from a bottle. "She used to come up here every weekend. She'd paint, read, just enjoy the quiet." "I didn't know she painted," Brielle said, sitting beside him. "She was talented. She never sold her work or anything, just did it for herself. She said this place was where she felt most at peace." He looked out at the clearing. "She talked about you a lot. She was worried about you, especially after you lost your job." "She knew about that?" Brielle was surprised. She'd been too ashamed to tell her aunt, had made excuses for why she couldn't visit as often. "She knew. And she understood. She wanted you to have this place because she thought you'd find the same peace here that she did." Terrence stood and stretched. "Come on. Let's get back to work. I want to finish the electrical today if possible." By late afternoon, Terrence had replaced the breaker box and tested each circuit. He flipped the main breaker, and lights suddenly glowed inside the cabin. Brielle, standing in the doorway, gasped. "We have power," she breathed. "We have power," Terrence confirmed, grinning. "I'll call the electric company tomorrow to get your service officially turned on. In the meantime, it's all working and safe." Brielle walked through the cabin, flipping switches, watching lights come on. Such a simple thing, but it felt like magic. The cabin was transformed, no longer dark and forbidding but warm and welcoming. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, turning to Terrence. "You don't have to thank me. Just take care of yourself and that baby." He started packing up his tools. "I'm going to head home now, but I'll be back tomorrow. We should check the plumbing next, make sure everything is working properly." After he left, Brielle stood alone in her cabin with the lights on and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real solid hope. This place could work. She could build a life here. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't meant to do it alone. The community dinner at Mountain Valley Baptist Church was more crowded than Brielle had expected. Long tables filled the fellowship hall, covered with casserole dishes, fried chicken, biscuits, vegetables, and desserts. The smell alone made her stomach growl. She'd arrived 15 minutes early, nervous about meeting so many new people at once. Helen, the woman who'd been texting her, spotted her immediately and rushed over. She was in her 60s, with white hair cut short and a smile that seemed to light up her whole face. "Brielle, I'm so glad you came. Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." Helen took her arm gently and led her into the crowd. The next hour was a blur of names and faces. Susan from the grocery store was there with her family. The librarian from the town library introduced herself as Margaret. There was Tom, who owned the hardware store, and his wife Rachel. Pastor Jim, a man in his 40s with kind eyes, welcomed her warmly. Everyone knew who she was. Everyone had a story about Aunt Dorothy. How she'd helped their kids with homework. How she'd organized food drives for families in need. How she'd never missed a Sunday service when she was in town. Brielle listened, learning about a side of her aunt she'd never fully known. When dinner was served, Brielle found herself seated between Helen and a young woman named Nora, who was about her age and also pregnant, though further along. "When are you due?" Nora asked, patting her own very round belly. 3 months. "You." 6 weeks. "I'm so ready to not be pregnant anymore." Nora laughed. "Are you planning to have the baby at County General?" "That's where I'm going. It's about 40 minutes from here, but it's a good hospital." They talked about pregnancy, about doctors and preparations. It was the first time Brielle had talked to another expectant mother, and it felt good to share the experience with someone who understood. After dinner, Helen pulled her aside. "We have a group of church members who help newcomers get settled. If you need anything, furniture, baby supplies, anything at all, you just let us know. We take care of our own here." Brielle felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know. Dorothy loved this community. She'd want us to help you." Helen squeezed her hand. "You're not alone here, honey. Remember that." Driving back to the cabin later, Brielle felt lighter than she had in weeks. The fear was still there, the uncertainty about the future, but it was balanced now by something else. Community. Connection. The feeling that people cared. When she arrived at the guest cabin, she found Terrence sitting on the porch steps. "How was the dinner?" he asked, standing as she approached. "It was wonderful. Everyone was so kind." She unlocked the door. "Have you been waiting long?" "Just a few minutes. I wanted to check if you needed anything before tomorrow. I'm planning to work on your plumbing in the morning." He paused. Also, I brought you something. He walked to his truck and returned with a wooden rocking chair. This was your aunt's. She kept it on her porch. I thought you might want it. Brielle ran her hand over the smooth armrests. It's beautiful. She used to sit in it for hours just rocking and looking at the mountains. Terence carried it onto the porch. I thought it belonged with you. After he left, Brielle sat in the rocking chair, gently moving back and forth. She could picture Aunt Dorothy here at peace watching the sunset. She felt connected to her aunt in a way she never had before. The next morning she met Terence at the cabin early. He brought more tools and supplies. While he worked on checking the pipes under the sink, Brielle decided to tackle the bedroom. The mattress definitely needed to go, but maybe she could clean the frame and eventually get a new mattress. As she pulled the old mattress off the bed frame, something underneath caught her eye. Several floorboards looked different from the others, lighter in color, as if they'd been removed and replaced more recently. Curious, she knelt down and pressed on one of them. It shifted slightly. Terence, she called. Can you come here for a minute? He appeared in the doorway, wrench in hand. What's up? These floorboards look loose. Is that a problem? He knelt beside her and examined them. They've definitely been taken up and put back. See how these nails are newer than the others? He pulled a pry bar from his tool belt. Want me to take a look? Yes, please. Terence carefully pried up the first board, then the second and third. Beneath them, in the space between the floor joists, sat a metal box about the size of a shoebox. Brielle's heart raced. What is that? Only one way to find out. Terence lifted the box out carefully and set it on the floor. The box wasn't locked. Brielle opened it with shaking hands. Inside were journals, 3 of them, bound in leather with dates written on the covers. Beneath the journals was a folded piece of paper that looked older and more delicate. She unfolded the paper carefully. It was a hand-drawn map of the property, but not the property as she knew it. This map showed the cabin, the clearing, and detailed markings throughout the surrounding woods. Small X marks dotted various locations, each with a number beside it. What do you think it means? Brielle whispered. Terence leaned closer. I'm not sure. But these journals might explain it. He stood. I'll give you some privacy to read. Call me if you need anything. After he returned to the kitchen, Brielle sat on the floor and opened the first journal. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, definitely feminine. The first entry was dated 40 years ago. June 3rd. Today I discovered the truth about Grandma Rosemary. All these years we thought her paintings were lost or destroyed. But they're not lost. They're hidden. After Grandpa died and the family fought over everything, she hid her best work to keep it safe from them. She left me clues and I found the first painting today. It's magnificent. I understand now why she did this. Art shouldn't be divided up and sold off to pay debts. It should be preserved, protected, cherished. I'm going to find the rest. I'm going to keep her secret and guard her legacy. Brielle's hands trembled as she turned the pages. Entry after entry detailed Aunt Dorothy's search for hidden paintings. Her grandmother, Rosemary, had been an artist, apparently a talented one. She'd hidden her work around the property before she died, leaving cryptic clues for someone to find. September 15th. Found 3 more today. They're wrapped in oilcloth and sealed in waterproof containers. Still in perfect condition after all these years. Grandma was brilliant not just as an artist but as a planner. The family would have sold these for pennies if they'd found them. They never understood her art. But I do. I see what she was trying to capture, the soul of these mountains, the peace of this place. The second journal covered the next decade. Dorothy had found painting after painting, carefully excavated them and stored them. She'd researched her grandmother's life, discovering that Rosemary had been well known in regional art circles in the 1920s and 30s but had been forgotten after her death. I want to bring Grandma's work back to light someday, one entry read. But not yet. The family is still too greedy, too quick to see dollar signs instead of beauty. When the time is right, when I find someone who will appreciate what this means, I'll share the secret. Until then, I keep looking. The third journal was more recent, covering the last 5 years of Aunt Dorothy's life. The entries were shorter, more reflective. I'm getting older and I worry about what will happen to the paintings when I'm gone. I found almost all of them now, 27 in total. They're stored safely waiting. I think of Brielle often. She has Grandma's eyes, the same way of looking at the world. Maybe she's the one. Maybe she'll understand. The last entry was dated just 2 months before Aunt Dorothy's death. I'm leaving the cabin to Brielle. The family will laugh, will think it's worthless. But she'll look deeper. She'll find what I've left for her. And when she does, she'll have choices. She can sell the paintings and be financially secure. Or she can find another way to honor Grandma's legacy. Either way she'll be taken care of. I just hope she knows how much I believe in her. Brielle closed the journal and sat in stunned silence. Paintings. Her great-grandmother's paintings hidden somewhere on this property, possibly valuable. And Aunt Dorothy had left them for her to find. She looked at the map again. 27 X marks. 27 hiding places. Some were close to the cabin, others deep in the woods. This was why Dorothy had left her this property. Not just the cabin but the treasure hidden within it. "Terence?" she called out, her voice shaky. He appeared immediately. "You okay? You look pale. I need to show you something." She handed him the journals and the map. He read quickly, his eyes widening with each page. When he finished, he looked at her with something like awe. "Brielle, do you know what this means? If these paintings are real, if they're in good condition, they could be worth a fortune. Your great-grandmother, Rosemary Jackson, I've heard that name. She was famous in the region back in the day. I need to find them," Brielle said, determination filling her. "All of them. I need to see what Aunt Dorothy protected all these years." "Then we'll find them together," Terence said without hesitation. "We'll start tomorrow. For today, let me finish the plumbing. Then we'll make a plan." That night, back at the guest cabin, Brielle couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the map, the journals, the hidden paintings. The relatives who had laughed at her inheritance had no idea what she'd actually received. Not just a cabin but a legacy. A mystery. And maybe, just maybe, a future. The search began at first light. Terence arrived at the guest cabin with coffee, breakfast sandwiches, and 2 metal detectors. "I borrowed these from Tom at the hardware store," he explained. "Your aunt buried the containers, so these might help us locate them faster than digging randomly." They spread the map on the small table and studied it carefully. The X marks clustered in 3 areas: near the cabin along what looked like a creek bed, and deeper in the woods near a rock formation. "Let's start closest to the cabin and work our way out," Brielle suggested. The journal said she found the first painting near here. The first X mark was only 30 feet from the cabin's back wall, near an old oak tree. Terence swept the metal detector back and forth while Brielle followed with a shovel. Within minutes, the detector beeped steadily. "Got something?" Terence said. He marked the spot with a stick. "Your turn." Brielle dug carefully, not wanting to damage whatever lay beneath. About 2 feet down, her shovel struck something hard. She set the shovel aside and used her hands to clear away the dirt, revealing a metal container about the size of a small suitcase. "That's it," she breathed. "That's one of them." They lifted the container out together and carried it to the cabin porch. Brielle wiped the dirt from the lid. It was sealed with wax around the edges, just as the journal had described. She broke the seal carefully and opened the container. Inside, wrapped in multiple layers of oilcloth, was a painting. Brielle unwrapped it slowly, her hands shaking. The painting showed the mountains at sunrise, the peaks catching golden light while the valleys below still slept in shadow. The brushwork was exquisite, every detail precise yet somehow capturing the feeling of the place rather than just its appearance. In the bottom corner was a signature. R. Jackson, 1932. "It's beautiful," Terence whispered. "It's perfect." Brielle felt tears on her cheeks. She was so talented. They carefully rewrapped the painting and carried it inside to keep it safe. Then they returned to the search with renewed energy. By lunchtime they'd found 4 more containers. Each held a painting, each more stunning than the last. Mountains in winter covered in snow. A summer meadow filled with wildflowers. The cabin itself as it must have looked 90 years ago, surrounded by young trees. A portrait of a woman sitting on the porch, probably Rosemary herself. "We should stop and eat," Terence said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "And you need to rest. You've been on your feet for hours." They ate the sandwiches Terence had brought, sitting on the cabin porch with the paintings arrayed around them. Brielle couldn't stop looking at them, couldn't quite believe they were real. "What are you going to do with them?" Terence asked. "I don't know yet. The journal said Aunt Dorothy wanted them to be seen, to honor my great-grandmother's legacy. But she also wanted to make sure they were protected." Brielle touched the frame of the nearest painting. "I need to learn more about her life and work. Maybe I could donate them to a museum? Or create a small gallery? Whatever you decide, you have options now. Real options." Terence smiled. "Your aunt gave you a gift. Not just the paintings but the choice of what to do with them." They spent the afternoon finding more paintings. By sunset, they'd recovered 12 of the 27 marked on the map. Each one was unique, each one masterfully done. Brielle's great-grandmother had captured the spirit of these mountains, the changing seasons, the play of light and shadow. "We should call it a day," Terence said as darkness approached. "We can continue tomorrow." But Brielle was too excited to stop. "Just one more. There's an X marked right near that rock formation over there. It's close." They walked to the spot together, the metal detector beeping immediately. This container was larger than the others and heavier. It took both of them to lift it out of the ground. Inside wasn't a painting but a leather portfolio. Brielle opened it carefully and gasped. It contained documents, letters, newspaper clippings, photographs, and what looked like sale receipts. "What is all this?" she murmured, sitting down right there on the ground to look through it. The letters were correspondence between Rosemary and various art galleries in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. They praised her work, discussed exhibitions, mentioned sales. The newspaper clippings showed reviews of her shows, all glowing. One headline read, "Regional artist Rosemary Jackson captures American landscape like no other." She was famous, Brielle said, stunned. "Really famous? Why didn't anyone in the family know this?" Terence read over her shoulder. "Look at the dates. Most of this is from the 1920s and 30s. Then there's a gap. Nothing after 1935. Brielle shuffled through more documents and found a letter dated 1936, written in Rosemary's handwriting. It was addressed to someone named Catherine. "Dearest Catherine, I'm writing to tell you I'm leaving New York. The galleries want me to paint what sells, not what I see. They want pretty postcards, not truth. I won't compromise my vision for money. I'm going back to the mountains, back to the cabin where I can paint freely. Let them forget me. I'll keep creating whether anyone sees it or not. The work matters more than fame. Love, Rose." She walked away, Brielle said softly. She was successful, and she walked away because she wouldn't compromise. "Just like your aunt walked away from the family's greed," Terence added. "It runs in your blood, I guess. Integrity." They carried the portfolio back to the cabin and secured everything inside. Brielle felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd found. Not just paintings but proof of her great-grandmother's talent and principles. A legacy of choosing art over money, integrity over fame. That night, unable to sleep, Brielle called the lawyer, Richard Patterson. She explained what she'd found, reading him portions of the journal entries and describing the paintings. "Remarkable," he said when she finished. "Dorothy hinted that the property had value, but she never told me the full story. She was protecting it even from me. What should I do? How do I find out what they're worth? How do I preserve them properly? I have a contact at the Regional Art Museum in Asheville. Her name is Dr. Sharon Cole. She specializes in early 20th century American art. With your permission, I'll reach out to her. She can authenticate the paintings and advise you on preservation and next steps." "Yes, please. I'd appreciate that." "Brielle," the lawyer said carefully, "you understand this could be life-changing? If these paintings are authentic and in good condition, we're talking about significant value. Perhaps hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more." Brielle looked around the small guest cabin, thought about her dwindling bank account and her growing belly. Life-changing didn't begin to cover it. "I understand," she said quietly. "But it's not just about money. My great-grandmother created something important. Aunt Dorothy protected it. I want to honor that. Dorothy chose well when she left this to you," Richard said. "I'll call Dr. Cole first thing in the morning." After they hung up, Brielle walked over to her cabin. She turned on the lights, now so grateful for the electricity Terence had restored. She stood among the paintings they'd recovered, really looking at each one. Her great-grandmother had painted these mountains with love. Every brushstroke showed her connection to this place. Aunt Dorothy had understood that and had kept the work safe, waiting for the right person to carry the legacy forward. "I won't let you down," Brielle whispered to the empty cabin, to the memory of two women she wished she'd known better. "I'll find a way to share this with the world and keep it protected. I promise." A kick from the baby reminded her that she was creating her own legacy now too. This child would grow up knowing about her great-great-grandmother's talent, about Aunt Dorothy's integrity. The cabin, the paintings, the story behind them all, this would be part of her daughter's heritage. Brielle turned off the lights and locked the door. Tomorrow they'd search for more paintings. But tonight, she just needed to sit with the wonder of what had already been found. Walking back through the darkening woods to the guest cabin, she saw lights on at Terence's main house. He'd spent his whole day helping her, asking nothing in return, just as he'd been doing since she arrived. She thought about his kindness, his steady presence, the way he'd celebrated each discovery with her as if it were his own. Maybe she wasn't just finding paintings and legacies. Maybe she was finding something else too. Something she hadn't been looking for but needed just as much. Connection. Trust. The beginning of something that could grow into more. She smiled to herself as she climbed the steps to the guest cabin. The future, once so frightening, now felt full of possibility. Dr. Sharon Cole arrived 4 days later, driving up the gravel road in a silver SUV packed with equipment. She was in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. Richard Patterson, the lawyer, had come with her. Brielle had spent those 4 days continuing the search with Terrence. They'd found 18 paintings total, each one carefully unwrapped, documented, and stored in the cabin. Now they all stood in the main room, leaning against the walls, waiting for expert evaluation. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Cole said, moving slowly from painting to painting, her expression intense with focus. "I knew Rosemary Jackson's name, but I'd never seen much of her work. Most of it was lost, or so we thought. But this," she turned to face Brielle, "is museum quality. Every single one." "Are they authentic?" Brielle asked, her heart pounding. "I'll need to do detailed analysis, but yes, I'm confident they are. The style matches her known work, the signatures are consistent, and the age of the materials appears correct." Dr. Cole pulled out a camera. "May I photograph them? I want to consult with some colleagues." They spent the afternoon documenting each painting. Dr. Cole measured, photographed from multiple angles, and made detailed notes. Richard watched quietly, occasionally glancing at Brielle with something like pride. Finally, as the sun began to set, Dr. Cole sat down at the small table and gestured for Brielle to join her. "Let me be direct," she said. "These paintings represent a significant find. Rosemary Jackson was a respected artist in her time, but she's been largely forgotten. This collection could revive interest in her work. As for value, a conservative estimate would put the entire collection at somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. Possibly more if we can generate strong interest through exhibitions and publications." Brielle felt dizzy. $500,000? Potentially. "But here's what I want to propose." Dr. Cole leaned forward. "The Regional Art Museum would like to purchase the collection. We'd offer you $300,000, guaranteed right now. We'd also name a gallery wing after Rosemary Jackson, ensuring her legacy is preserved. You'd maintain input on how her work is presented." It was a good offer. An amazing offer. Life-changing money. Brielle could pay for everything her baby would need, could secure their future, could stop worrying about every dollar. But something made her hesitate. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." Dr. Cole handed her a business card. "Call me when you're ready to discuss further." After they left, Brielle sat on the porch with Terrence. The evening air was cool and pleasant. Lightning bugs flickered in the clearing. $300,000? Terrence said quietly. "That's incredible." "It is. But I keep thinking about what Aunt Dorothy wrote in her journal. She wanted the work to be seen, but she also wanted it protected, kept together. If I sell it all to the museum, I lose control over it. What if they decide to sell some of it later? What if they need money and auction off pieces? What's your alternative?" Brielle had been thinking about this for hours. "What if I created a small museum here? Used this cabin and maybe built a gallery space beside it? I could display the paintings, offer tours, maybe hold art classes for local kids. Keep everything together just like Aunt Dorothy wanted. Honor my great-grandmother by making her work accessible but protected. That would take money to set up. Money you don't have right now. I could sell a few paintings. Maybe 5 or 6, enough to fund the construction and get started. Keep the rest for the permanent collection." She turned to him. "What do you think? Am I crazy?" "I think it's brilliant." Terrence smiled. "I think your aunt would love it. And I think you're exactly the right person to make it happen. Would you help me? I'd pay you, of course, once I sell some paintings. But I'd need someone who knows construction, who understands this place. You couldn't keep me away." He stood and offered his hand to help her up. "Come on. Let's walk the property. If we're building a gallery, we need to find the perfect spot." They spent the next hour walking through the clearing and into the woods, discussing possibilities. There was a flat area about 50 yards from the cabin that would be perfect. Large enough for a good-sized building but still close enough to feel connected to the original cabin. "We could build it to match the cabin style," Terrence said, pacing off the space. "Use similar materials, keep it feeling authentic to the place. Inside, we'd need climate control for the paintings, good lighting, security. But it's doable. Very doable." Over the next 2 weeks, plans took shape. Richard connected Brielle with an auction house that specialized in regional art. They agreed to sell 6 paintings, carefully chosen to be somewhat representative of the collection but not the absolute best pieces. The auction was scheduled for 8 weeks away, enough time to properly market them and attract serious buyers. Meanwhile, Terence drew up plans for the gallery building. He worked with an architect friend to ensure everything met code and would properly preserve the artwork. The estimated cost was $60,000 for a 1,500 square foot space with all necessary systems. Even at the low end of sale estimates, you'll clear that easily, Terence assured her. And still have money left for operating expenses, marketing, setting up the foundation. Foundation. That was another piece. Richard helped Brielle establish a non-profit foundation to own and operate the gallery. This would protect the artwork, provide tax benefits, and allow her to accept donations to support programming. Your great-grandmother's work will be permanently preserved, Richard explained. No one can sell it off or split it up. It stays together forever. Do you believe in honoring the past while building your future? Would you have taken the quick money, or would you have chosen the harder path to preserve a legacy? Leave a comment with your thoughts, and if you're invested in Brielle's journey, please subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what you can sell, it's what you choose to protect. As plans progressed, Brielle moved out of the guest cabin and into her own cabin. Terence had helped her fix it up over the weeks. They'd replaced the old mattress with a new one, repaired the porch, patched the roof and painted the interior. It was small, but it was hers and it was starting to feel like home. The community at the church had rallied around her too. Helen organized a baby shower, and Brielle received more gifts than she could have imagined. A crib, clothes, diapers, blankets, even a stroller. Nora, the other pregnant woman, had given birth to a healthy baby boy, and she gave Brielle all her advice and encouragement. "You're going to be fine," Nora said, holding her son while visiting Brielle. "You have a whole village here ready to help you." And she did. The isolation she'd felt when she first arrived had been replaced by connection. She had friends now, people who checked on her, who offered help without being asked, who celebrated her successes as if they were their own. But the person she'd grown closest to was Terence. They spent nearly every day together, working on the gallery plans, searching for the remaining paintings, or just talking on the porch as evening fell. He told her about his life, how he'd taken over his father's construction business, how he'd struggled after his dad died but eventually found his way. She told him about her ex-boyfriend, about losing her job, about the fear and shame that had consumed her before she came here. "I don't feel ashamed anymore," she said one evening. They were sitting on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky pink and orange. "I was so worried about being judged, about people thinking I'd failed. But here no one judges me. They just accept me." "That's because you're part of us now," Terence said simply. "And because they see what I see, someone strong, creative, and determined. Someone worth knowing." Brielle felt warmth spread through her chest, but it wasn't just his words. It was the way he looked at her, the care in his actions, the steady presence he'd been since the day they met. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Anything. Why have you helped me so much? And please don't say it's just because of what Aunt Dorothy did for your family. There's more to it than that, isn't there?" Terence was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "Yes, there's more. From the first day I met you, when you were standing by your car looking scared but defiant, I was drawn to you. As I got to know you, as I watched you face every challenge without giving up, I fell for you. Art. But I didn't say anything because I didn't want to complicate things while you were dealing with so much. I just wanted to be there for you, whatever that meant." Brielle's breath caught. She'd felt the connection growing between them but had been afraid to acknowledge it, afraid to trust her feelings after being hurt before. But Terence wasn't like her ex. He'd proven that through actions, not just words. "I've been falling for you too," she admitted. "But I was scared. Scared to let anyone in again. Scared to believe someone could actually want me, baby, and all the mess that comes with me." Terence reached out and took her hand. "You're not a mess. You're amazing. And I don't just want you despite the baby. I want both of you, the whole package. I want to be there when she's born. I want to help you build this gallery. I want to build a life with you if you'll let me." Tears streamed down Brielle's face, but they were happy tears this time. Yes, I'll let you. I want that too." He pulled her close, careful of her pregnant belly, and kissed her gently. It was a kiss full of promise, of new beginnings, of hope for the future they'd build together. That night, sitting in the cabin with Terence beside her, Brielle thought about how much her life had changed in just a few weeks. She'd gone from hopeless and alone to surrounded by support and love. The cabin everyone had mocked had become her salvation. The legacy everyone had dismissed had become her purpose. And the neighbor who'd shown up to help had become the man she loved. The auction results exceeded every expectation. The 6 paintings sold for a combined total of $190,000, nearly double the conservative estimates. Collectors from across the country had bid aggressively, driving prices up. Dr. Cole called Brielle personally to share the news. "This is just the beginning," she said. "Interest in Rosemary Jackson's work is exploding. Scholars are already reaching out, wanting to write papers about her. Your gallery is going to put her back on the map where she belongs." Brielle deposited the money and immediately transferred funds to begin gallery construction. Terrence had already cleared the building site and laid the foundation. With the auction money, they could proceed without delay. The town was excited about the project. Tom from the hardware store gave her a discount on materials. Several church members volunteered their labor on weekends. What had started as Brielle's dream became a community effort. But not everyone was happy about her success. 3 weeks after the auction, Patricia and Gerald, the relatives who'd laughed at Brielle's inheritance, showed up at the cabin unannounced. Brielle was 7 months pregnant now, moving more slowly, tiring more easily. She was resting on the porch when their expensive car pulled into the clearing. Her stomach dropped. She'd hoped never to see them again. Well, Patricia said, climbing out of the car and looking around. "Quite the little setup you have here. We heard about your auction. Heard you made quite a lot of money off artwork that should have been family property." Brielle stood slowly, using the porch railing for support. Terrence was at the gallery site, but she could see him in the distance. He'd noticed the car and was already walking toward them. "The paintings were on my property," Brielle said calmly. "The property Aunt Dorothy left to me. A property we should have been informed held valuable assets," Gerald said, approaching the porch. His pleasant expression from the lawyer's office was gone, replaced by obvious anger. "If we'd known about the paintings, we would have contested the will. And you would have lost." Richard Patterson emerged from behind the cabin, briefcase in hand. Brielle hadn't known he was visiting today, but she was grateful for his timing. "The will is ironclad, and everything on the property, including what was buried on it, belongs to Miss Jackson." Patricia's face flushed. "Those paintings belong to our grandmother too. We have just as much right to them." "Actually you don't," Richard said pleasantly. "Rosemary Jackson's will specified that all her artwork was to go to her daughter, Dorothy. Dorothy then had full legal right to dispose of that art as she saw fit. She chose to hide it and ultimately leave it to Brielle. Everything was done legally and properly." "It's not fair," Gerald said, his voice rising. "We're family. We should get a share." Terrence arrived then, standing beside Brielle on the porch. His presence was solid, protective. "I think you should leave," he said quietly. "This doesn't concern you," Patricia snapped. "It concerns me when people harass the woman I love." Terrence's voice remained calm but held an edge of steel. "Brielle doesn't owe you anything. Your grandmother wanted her work protected. Dorothy protected it. Now Brielle is honoring both of them. If you actually cared about family or legacy instead of money, you'd be grateful." "We could sue," Gerald threatened. "We could tie this up in court for years." "You could try," Richard agreed. "And you'd lose and waste thousands of dollars in legal fees in the process. Or you could accept that Dorothy made her choice, that it was her right to make that choice and move on with your lives." Patricia looked between them all, her expression venomous. "You think you're so special," she said to Brielle. "You show up pregnant and desperate, and suddenly you're the golden child?" Dorothy was senile at the end. "That's the only explanation for why she'd leave everything to you. That's enough." Brielle's voice was quiet but firm. "Aunt Dorothy was not senile. She was the clearest thinking person I ever knew. She saw through all of you years ago. That's why she didn't leave you her most precious possession. She knew you'd sell it off without a second thought. She knew none of you cared about her, only about what you could get from her. And you're different?" Patricia's laugh was bitter. "You're keeping it all for yourself." "No, I'm not. I'm creating a museum, a free public gallery where anyone can come see my great-grandmother's work. I'm starting an art program for local children. I'm preserving and sharing, not hoarding." Brielle felt the baby kick and placed a hand on her belly. Aunt Dorothy wanted these paintings to matter. She wanted them to touch people, inspire people. "That's what I'm making happen." "Come on," Gerald said to Patricia. "We're wasting our time here." But Patricia wasn't done. "This isn't over. We'll find a way to fight this." "No, you won't," Richard said. Because I've already filed all necessary documentation with the court showing clear chain of ownership and intent. But please do consult with a lawyer. Any attorney worth their fee will tell you that you have no case. Save yourself the money and the embarrassment. After they left, Brielle sank back into her chair, shaking. Terrence knelt beside her, taking her hands. You okay? I will be. I just didn't expect them to show up like that. Richard sat on the porch steps. They may try again, but they have no legal standing. Don't let them intimidate you. Dorothy's will is solid, and the law is on your side. Why are people like that? Brielle asked. Why does money make people so cruel? It's not really about money, Richard said thoughtfully. It's about ego. They can't stand that you, someone they look down on, ended up with something valuable. It threatens their sense of superiority. Well, they can stay mad, Terrence said. Because Brielle's not going anywhere and neither am I. After Richard left, Brielle and Terrence sat together on the porch. She leaned against him, feeling his warmth and strength. I meant what I said, Terrence told her. I love you. And I'm not letting anyone hurt you or make you feel less than you are. I love you too, Brielle said. She'd never said those words to him before, though she'd felt them for weeks. Thank you for being here. Always. He kissed the top of her head. Now let's go look at the gallery progress. I want to show you what the crew accomplished today. The gallery building was taking beautiful shape. The frame was up, the roof was on, and walls were going up. It matched the cabin perfectly, looking like it had always belonged on this land. Inside, the space was open and bright, perfect for displaying art. We're ahead of schedule, Terrence said proudly. If everything goes well, we could be ready to open in 3 months. Right around when the baby comes, Brielle realized. We'll work around that. The baby comes first, then the gallery. He turned to her. Have you thought more about names? They'd talked about baby names a few times, but Brielle hadn't settled on anything. I want something that connects her to this place, to the legacy she's inheriting. Something meaningful. What about Rose? Terrence suggested. For your great-grandmother. Brielle felt a rush of emotion. Rose. That's perfect. Rose Jackson Montgomery. Terrence's eyes widened. Montgomery? If you want to marry me, that is. Brielle smiled through sudden tears. I know we haven't known each other that long, but I can't imagine my future without you in it. So yes, if you're asking or if you were planning to ask eventually, I'm saying yes now. Terrence laughed and pulled her close. I was planning to ask after the baby was born, give you time to settle into everything. But I'm not going to argue with this. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They stood there in the partially built gallery holding each other, planning their future. Outside, the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The relatives could threaten and complain all they wanted. It didn't matter. Brielle had found her home, her purpose, and her love. She had everything that mattered, and she wasn't letting anyone take it away. The next 2 months were a blur of activity. Terrence and his crew worked tirelessly on the gallery, and the building transformed from bare bones to a polished space. The walls were painted a soft cream that would complement the paintings without competing with them. Track lighting was installed, allowing for adjustable illumination on each piece. Climate control systems ensured the artwork would be preserved properly. Brielle spent her time preparing in other ways. She sorted through all the documents from the portfolio they'd found, working with a historian from the local college to catalog everything. They discovered letters from other famous artists of the era, proof that Rosemary had been connected to important artistic circles. This documentation would be displayed alongside the paintings, telling the full story of her life. She also worked with Helen and the church to develop the children's art program. Local teachers volunteered to help. Susan from the grocery store donated supplies. The program would be free for any child in the community, teaching basic art skills and art appreciation. Your great-grandmother would be so proud, Helen said one afternoon, visiting the cabin with a box of baby clothes she'd collected from various church members. She believed art should be accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. That's what I want too, Brielle said. She was 8 months pregnant now, large and uncomfortable but happy. I want kids who might never visit a big museum to have a chance to see real art, to learn that creating beauty is possible for anyone. As the gallery neared completion, word spread beyond the local community. Art publications ran articles about the rediscovered works of Rosemary Jackson. Requests came in from researchers wanting to study the paintings. Dr. Cole called weekly with updates on the growing interest. You're going to have visitors from all over, she said. I'd recommend you hire someone to help manage tours and visitors once you open. I've been thinking about that, Brielle admitted. Nora, my friend who just had her baby, used to work in hospitality before her son was born. She might be interested in part-time work once she's ready. Everything was falling into place, piece by piece. The impossible dream was becoming reality. One evening, with just 3 weeks until her due date, Terence took Brielle on a walk through the woods. They followed the path between her cabin and his house, taking their time in the fading light. "I want to show you something," he said, leading her to a spot she hadn't seen before. The trees opened to reveal a small clearing with a creek running through it. Someone had built a simple wooden bridge across the water, and wildflowers grew thick along the banks. "This is beautiful," Brielle said. "I didn't know this was here. This is where I want to build our house." Terence watched her reaction carefully. "The cabin is perfect for you right now, but it's small. Once we're married, once Rose is here, we'll need more space. I thought we could build here between your cabin and mine. Close to the gallery but still private." Brielle could picture it. A home nestled in these trees close to the creek, big enough for their growing family. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the night you agreed to marry me." He smiled. "I've been drawing sketches, figuring out the layout. 3 bedrooms, an art studio for you, big windows facing the mountains. Home. It sounds perfect." She leaned against him, feeling the baby move inside her. "When would we start building?" "After Rose is born, after the gallery opens, whenever you're ready. There's no rush. But I wanted you to see the spot, to know that I'm thinking about our future. All of it." They stood there as twilight deepened, dreaming out loud about the house they'd build, the life they'd create. Brielle felt a contentment she'd never known before. Everything that had seemed broken and hopeless 6 months ago had been remade into something beautiful. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "When I drove here that first day, when I saw the cabin and realized how bad it looked, I cried. I thought Aunt Dorothy had abandoned me, left me with nothing. I felt so alone and scared." "And now?" Terence asked. "Now I understand. She didn't abandon me. She gave me exactly what I needed. A place to start over, a legacy to protect, and a community to be part of. She knew I needed to find my own strength, my own purpose." The cabin looked like nothing, but it held everything. Brielle turned to face him. "And then I met you. The neighbor who showed up when I needed help and became the man I want to spend my life with." "Your aunt knew about me too," Terence said. "She told me once, about 2 years ago, that someone special was going to need this place someday. She made me promise I'd watch out for whoever that was. I think she knew it would be you. She was always planning ahead." Brielle laughed softly. "Playing matchmaker from beyond the grave." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand. The gallery was lit up in the distance, with the construction lights still on as the crew finished some detail work. Soon it would be filled with paintings, with visitors, with life. The next morning, Brielle woke to find Terence on her porch with breakfast and a small wrapped box. "What's this?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Open it." Inside was a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "I know we need to plan a proper wedding after Rose is born," Terence said. "But I wanted you to have this now. I wanted everyone to know you're taken." Brielle slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. "I love it. And I love you. I love you too. Both of you." He placed his hand gently on her belly, and the baby kicked against his palm. "I can't wait to meet her." 2 weeks later, at 3 in the morning, Brielle woke with contractions. She called Terence, who rushed over immediately. He drove her to the hospital, holding her hand, talking calmly even though she could see the excitement and nervousness in his eyes. Nora met them at the hospital, having gotten the news through the church network. "I'll wait with you," she said, hugging Brielle carefully. "You've got this." Labor was long and difficult, but not unbearable. Terence stayed beside her the entire time, never leaving, offering ice chips and encouragement. When Rose finally arrived at 2 in the afternoon, tiny and perfect and wailing, Brielle cried tears of joy. "She's beautiful," Terence whispered, his own eyes wet. "She's perfect." They let him cut the cord. When the nurses handed Rose to Brielle, wrapped in a pink blanket, she felt her world shift completely. This was her daughter. Her family. Her future. "Hi, Rose," she whispered. "Welcome home." Terence leaned over them both, and Brielle saw in his face absolute devotion. Not just to her, but to this baby who wasn't biologically his but was his in every way that mattered. "Thank you for letting me be here," he said quietly. "Thank you for wanting to be here." Brielle kissed him softly. "Thank you for everything." Over the next few days, the hospital room filled with visitors. Helen and the church ladies brought food and gifts. Susan came with balloons. Nora visited daily, offering advice from her own recent experience. The community that had embraced Brielle now embraced her daughter too. When they finally went home, Terence drove carefully, taking every turn slowly. He carried Rose into the cabin, where they'd set up the nursery corner with the crib and supplies from the baby shower. "It's smaller than I thought a baby would be," he joked nervously, watching as Brielle settled Rose into the crib. "You'll get used to it. Besides, you're going to be great." That night, with Rose sleeping peacefully nearby, Brielle and Terence sat on the porch. The gallery was nearly finished, just waiting for the paintings to be installed. Everything was ready. "Your aunt would be so happy," Terence said. "She'd love seeing what you've built here." "I think she knows," Brielle said. "Somehow I think she knows. And I think she's proud." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the mountains, holding hands, feeling blessed beyond measure. The journey from that humiliating day in the lawyer's office to this moment of peace had been hard, but every step had been worth it. Brielle had inherited a cabin everyone mocked. But she'd also inherited strength, purpose, love, and a legacy worth more than any amount of money. She'd found home in a place she'd never expected, and family in people she'd barely known. And now, looking at the future with Rose sleeping inside and Terence beside her, she knew that the best was still to come. The morning of the gallery opening dawned clear and bright. Brielle stood in front of the mirror in her cabin, adjusting the green dress that fit her post-pregnancy body perfectly. Rose, now 3 months old, lay in her crib nearby watching her mobile spin. "What do you think, baby girl?" Brielle asked, picking up her daughter. "Is Mama ready to do this?" Rose gurgled happily and Brielle took that as a yes. Outside, the clearing buzzed with activity. Terence and his crew were setting up chairs in rows facing the gallery entrance. Helen and the church ladies were arranging refreshment tables. Cars were already arriving, parking along the road, people walking up the hill with anticipation. The gallery looked stunning. The exterior matched the cabin perfectly as if it had always been there. A sign above the door read, "The Rosemary Jackson Gallery, a legacy preserved." Beside it, a smaller sign announced, "Free admission, donations welcome. Children's art programs available." Inside, the paintings were displayed beautifully, each one properly lit and positioned. Small plaques beside each one provided information about when and where it was painted. The portfolio documents were displayed in glass cases, telling the story of Rosemary's life and career. In one corner, a display showed photos of Aunt Dorothy, explaining her role in protecting and preserving the collection. Dr. Cole had traveled from Asheville for the opening, bringing several colleagues and even a reporter from a major art magazine. Richard Patterson was there too, beaming with pride at what his client had accomplished. By 11 o'clock, when the opening ceremony was scheduled to begin, over 200 people filled the clearing. Locals who'd helped with the project stood alongside art enthusiasts from across the state. Brielle spotted Susan and Tom, Nora with her baby, Pastor Jim, and dozens of other familiar faces. Terence found her before she went out to speak. "You ready?" "Nervous but ready." She adjusted Rose in her arms. "Stay close. Always." They walked out together and the crowd quieted. Brielle stood at a small podium Terence had built, looking out at all the faces. 3 months ago, she'd been terrified of public speaking. But today, with Rose in her arms and Terence beside her, she felt only gratitude and purpose. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice steady. 6 months ago, I arrived at this property with nothing but a few boxes and a lot of uncertainty. I'd inherited what my relatives called a worthless cabin in the middle of nowhere. They laughed at me. They pitied me. They couldn't understand why my Aunt Dorothy would leave me this place. She paused, looking around at the cabin and the gallery. But I found something here worth more than money. I found a legacy. My great-grandmother, Rosemary Jackson, was an artist who chose integrity over fame, who walked away from success rather than compromise her vision. My Aunt Dorothy was a woman who understood that protecting beauty and truth mattered more than personal wealth. She kept Rosemary's work safe for decades, waiting for the right time to share it. Brielle smiled. And she left it all to me not because I deserved it but because she believed I would honor what it represented. This gallery is my way of keeping that promise. Every painting here is available for the public to see for free forever. This collection will never be sold, never be split up, never be hidden away again. It belongs to all of us. The crowd applauded and Brielle felt tears in her eyes. She continued, I also want to announce our children's art program which begins next month. Any child in this community can take free art classes here, can learn about creativity and expression. Because art shouldn't be just for the wealthy or the educated. It should be for everyone who has eyes to see and a heart to feel. More applause, louder this time. Rose squirmed and Brielle adjusted her hold. I want to thank my community. You welcomed a stranger, you helped me when I had nothing to offer in return, you celebrated my successes as if they were your own. You showed me what family really means. It's not about blood or obligation. It's about showing up, about caring, about lifting each other up. She looked at Terrence. And I want to thank Terrence Montgomery, who appeared when I needed help most and never left. Who built this gallery with his own hands, who loves my daughter as if she were his own, who has given me a reason to believe in happy endings. We're getting married next month here in front of this gallery and you're all invited. The crowd cheered and people clapped. Terrence grinned, not embarrassed by the public announcement. They discussed it before and decided this was the perfect time to share their news. Now please, Brielle concluded, go inside and see what my great-grandmother created. See what my aunt protected. See what this community helped preserve. See what love and commitment and refusal to give up can accomplish. Thank you. As the crowd moved toward the gallery entrance, people stopped to hug Brielle, to thank her, to admire Rose. Dr. Cole approached with the reporter. That was a beautiful speech, Dr. Cole said. And this gallery is exactly what the art world needs. A reminder that art belongs to communities, not just collectors. The reporter asked if he could interview Brielle and take photos. She agreed, and they spent the next hour talking about the project, the paintings, and her great-grandmother's story. The reporter seemed genuinely moved by the narrative. Inside the gallery, visitors moved slowly from painting to painting, reading the descriptions, taking in the beauty. Brielle heard whispered conversations about technique and color, saw people taking photos, noticed several visitors wiping away tears. One elderly woman approached her. I knew your great-grandmother, she said softly. I was just a child, but she gave me art lessons. She told me everyone had beauty inside them waiting to come out. I never forgot that. Thank you for bringing her work back to the world. Brielle hugged the woman, careful not to squish Rose between them. Thank you for telling me that. It means everything. The afternoon stretched into evening. Someone had brought instruments and impromptu music filled the clearing. People danced, children ran and played, food was shared. It was part art opening, part community celebration, part wedding announcement party. Patricia and Gerald didn't come, which was a relief. But their absence didn't matter. The people who truly understood what this gallery represented were here, celebrating not just art, but the values it stood for: persistence, integrity, community, love. As the sun began to set, Brielle stood with Terrence near the gallery entrance, Rose asleep in her arms. We did it, she said quietly. We actually did it. You did it, Terrence corrected. I just helped. This vision, this determination, this refusal to settle for what everyone said was possible, that was all you. It was us, Brielle insisted. Together. Helen approached with an envelope. This is from the church, she said. We took up a collection. It's not much, but we wanted to contribute to the gallery's operating fund. Consider it our investment in the community's future. Inside was over $2,000 in checks and cash. Brielle was overwhelmed. This is too much. It's exactly right, Helen said firmly. You've given us something to be proud of. Let us be part of keeping it going. As darkness fell and people began to head home, Brielle looked around at everything they'd built. The cabin that had seemed so hopeless was now beautifully restored. The gallery stood solid and permanent, protecting its precious contents. The clearing that had felt lonely and isolated was now a gathering place, a destination. What are you thinking? Terrence asked. I'm thinking about that first night when I slept in my car because the cabin was too dark and cold. I'm thinking about how lost I felt, how certain I was that I'd made a terrible mistake. She shifted Rose to her other arm. And I'm thinking about how wrong I was. Coming here was the best decision I ever made. Not because of the paintings or the money, but because of what I found here. Purpose, community, love, home. No regrets. Terrence asked. Not one. Brielle leaned into him. The relatives can keep their cash and their properties. I got the real inheritance, the one that actually matters. I got a chance to start over, to build something meaningful, to honor the women who came before me. I got you and Rose and this life we're creating together. They stood there as the last visitors left, as the clearing grew quiet again, as stars appeared overhead. The gallery's lights were still on, visible through the windows, illuminating the paintings inside. Tomorrow they'd start the children's art program planning. Tomorrow they'd finalize wedding details. Tomorrow they'd continue building their life together. But tonight, They just stood in the peaceful dark, holding their daughter, grateful for the journey that had brought them here. The cabin everyone mocked had become a home. The inheritance everyone laughed at had become a legacy. And the pregnant woman who arrived desperate and alone had become a mother, a partner, a curator, and a member of a community that valued her. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most unlikely packages. Sometimes what looks like nothing is actually everything. And sometimes, when you refuse to give up, when you accept help with grace, when you honor the past while building the future, you get a happy ending after all. The wedding took place 4 weeks later on a perfect September afternoon. The clearing was filled with chairs, and the aisle was lined with wildflowers picked from the meadow. Brielle wore a simple white dress, practical enough to hold Rose but elegant enough for the occasion. Her daughter was dressed in a tiny cream outfit, sleeping peacefully in Nora's arms as the ceremony began. Terence stood at the makeshift altar in front of the gallery, wearing a navy suit that matched his eyes. Pastor Jim was officiating, and the entire community had turned out to witness the moment. Helen walked Brielle down the aisle, having volunteered when Brielle mentioned she had no one else to do it. "I'm honored," Helen had said. "Dorothy would want someone who loves you to give you away, and I do love you, sweetheart." As they walked between the rows of chairs, past friends and neighbors, Brielle thought about how much had changed in just 7 months. She'd arrived here broken and alone. Now she was surrounded by people who cared, about to marry a man who had shown her what real love looked like. When they reached Terence, Helen placed Brielle's hand in his and whispered, "Be happy." Pastor Jim's service was short and meaningful. He spoke about partnership, about building a life on the foundation of respect and love. When it came time for vows, Terence spoke first. "Brielle, when I met you, I saw someone strong pretending to be fine. I saw someone who'd been hurt but refused to be bitter. I saw someone worth knowing, worth loving, worth building a life with. You've made me a better man. You've given me a family when I thought I'd be alone forever. I promise to always be your partner, to support your dreams, to love you and Rose with everything I have. Today and always." Brielle felt tears on her cheeks. "Terence, I came here expecting nothing and found everything. You showed up when I needed help and never asked for anything in return. You've proven that good men exist, that love doesn't have to hurt, that family is made by choice as much as blood. I promise to build this life with you, to face every challenge together, to never take your love for granted. You are my home and I will always cherish that gift." They exchanged rings, simple bands that matched Brielle's engagement ring. When Pastor Jim pronounced them married, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. The reception was held right there in the clearing. Tables were set up and food appeared in abundance. There was no fancy catering, just dishes prepared by community members, each one made with care. Fried chicken, potato salad, green beans, cornbread, pies and cakes covered the tables. As Brielle and Terence cut their cake, a simple but delicious vanilla creation made by Susan, Dr. Cole approached. "I have news," she said, smiling. "The art magazine that covered your opening has generated enormous interest. We've received inquiries from museums across the country wanting to borrow paintings for traveling exhibitions. If you're interested, we could set up a loan program. Your great-grandmother's work could reach audiences she never dreamed of, while still being based here in her home." "That sounds perfect," Brielle said. "As long as the core collection always stays here, available to our community. That's the plan. You'd retain ownership and control, just sharing selectively." Dr. Cole sipped her punch. "I also heard from a publisher. They want to produce a book about Rosemary Jackson's life and art. It would bring her story to even more people." Brielle felt overwhelmed in the best way. All of this from paintings people thought were worthless. They were never worthless. They just needed the right person to recognize their value. Dr. Cole squeezed her hand. "Your aunt chose well." As evening fell, string lights came on, illuminating the clearing. Music played and people danced. Brielle held Rose while Terence talked with Tom about plans for the house they'd start building soon. She looked around at everyone gathered here and felt profoundly grateful. "Mind if I cut in?" Richard Patterson, the lawyer, appeared beside her. "I wanted to give you something." He handed her a manila envelope, similar to the one he'd given her 7 months ago in his office. "Dorothy left this with instructions that I give it to you on your wedding day." Brielle opened it carefully and found a letter in her aunt's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Brielle, if you're reading this, you've married a good man and found your place in the world. I'm so proud of you, though I wish I could be there to see it. I want you to know that leaving you the cabin was never about giving you money or property. It was about giving you a chance to discover your own strength, to find your own path, to build a life based on what matters. The paintings were a gift, yes, but the real gift was the journey of discovering them, of deciding what to do with them, of choosing to honor legacy over profit. You've done exactly what I hoped. You've taken nothing and made it into something meaningful. You've proven that kindness, persistence, and integrity will always win. Keep that spirit, pass it on to your daughter, and know that I'm watching over you with love. Always, Aunt Dorothy. Brielle read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Terence came over and read it over her shoulder. She knew, Brielle whispered. She knew exactly what would happen. She believed in you, Terence said. And she was right to believe. Later, after most guests had left, Brielle and Terence walked to the gallery. They went inside, turning on just enough lights to see the paintings. Rose was asleep against Brielle's shoulder. This is what it's all about, Brielle said quietly, looking at the painting of the cabin as it once was. Not the money, not even the art itself. It's about honoring the people who came before us, about creating something that will outlast us, about choosing what's right over what's easy. And about love, Terence added. Your great-grandmother loved these mountains. Your aunt loved you. I love both of you. Love is what makes everything else possible. They stood there for a long moment, the three of them together, surrounded by art and history and hope. Then Terence locked up the gallery and they walked back to the cabin. Over the next few months, life fell into a comfortable rhythm. They broke ground on the new house, watching it rise on the spot by the creek. The children's art program began with 15 students, and within weeks the waiting list had grown to over 30. The gallery welcomed visitors from nearby states, and word continued to spread. Patricia and Gerald made one more attempt to cause trouble, hiring a lawyer to investigate the will. But Richard had anticipated this and had everything documented so thoroughly that their lawyer advised them to drop it. They did, finally accepting that they'd lost. Good riddance, Helen said when she heard. Some people never learn that grasping for money just pushes away everything that actually matters. 1 year after Brielle first arrived at the cabin, the community held a celebration. They called it the Legacy Festival, honoring both Rosemary Jackson's art and the community spirit that had preserved it. Brielle spoke again, this time with Rose toddling around on unsteady legs while Terence kept a watchful eye on her. A year ago I was at my lowest point, she told the crowd. I'd lost everything I thought mattered. My job, my relationship, my sense of security. I came here not knowing what I'd find. What I found was more valuable than anything I'd lost. I found purpose in preserving my great-grandmother's art. I found community in all of you. I found love with Terence. And I found myself. She paused, watching Rose try to catch a butterfly. Aunt Dorothy taught me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch, the beauty you preserve, the love you share, and the legacy you leave. The cabin everyone mocked became my sanctuary. The inheritance everyone pitied became my treasure. And the future that looked impossible became more beautiful than I ever imagined. The crowd applauded, and Rose clapped her tiny hands too, making everyone laugh. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains, Brielle sat in Aunt Dorothy's rocking chair on the cabin porch. Their new house was nearly finished, but she'd always keep this cabin, always remember what it represented. Terence sat beside her and Rose played with blocks at their feet. What are you thinking about? Terence asked. I'm thinking about that day in the lawyer's office. About Patricia's laugh and Gerald's smirk. About how certain they were that I'd gotten nothing. Brielle smiled. I wonder if they ever think about what they missed. I doubt it. People like that only see what they want to see. He took her hand. But we see clearly and we're grateful for it. I am grateful, Brielle agreed. For all of it. Even the hard parts because they led me here. As darkness fell, they moved inside. The cabin was cozy now, truly a home. Photos lined the walls. Aunt Dorothy, Rosemary Jackson, and new pictures of their growing family. The first painting Brielle had found hung above the fireplace, a constant reminder of where their journey had begun. Before bed, Brielle wrote in the journal she'd started keeping, wanting to document this time for Rose to read someday. Dear Rose, she wrote, today we celebrated how far we've come. But I want you to know about where we started, about the tiny cabin everyone laughed at and the inheritance they thought was worthless. I want you to know that your great-great-grandmother was brave enough to walk away from fame for integrity. That your great-aunt Dorothy was wise enough to protect beauty instead of profiting from it. And that your mother learned from both of them that what matters isn't what you have, but what you do with it. This legacy is yours now too. Someday you'll make your own choices about what matters, what to protect, what to pass on. I hope you'll remember that kindness, hope, and love should always lead. That's the real inheritance, more valuable than any painting or property. That's what I hope to give you. She closed the journal and looked at Terence, already asleep with Rose cuddled against him in their bed. Her family. Her home. Her life. They'd come to this place with nothing and built everything. They'd taken what others dismissed and revealed its true value. They'd proven that endings can become beginnings, that loss can transform into gain, that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. The tiny cabin in the mountains, the one everyone laughed at, had opened its door to reveal treasures beyond measure. Not just paintings and art and money, though those were there too. But something deeper: purpose, community, love, and legacy. And in the end, those were the things that truly made a life rich.